He created the perfect home for his elderly mother, never knowing the danger was coming from inside the house. Disguised as a driver, he discovered dark secrets and cruel acts behind smiling faces. At the engagement dinner, he revealed everything in front of everyone, and no one was prepared for the truth. If this story caught your interest, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching from. Let's continue. The morning crept slowly over New York City, bringing with it that hazy light only the city can offer, blending sky and concrete into a palette of grey and gold. Michael Thompson stood at the window of his private office on the top floor of the mansion, which sat on a generous plot of land in Greenwich, Connecticut, observing the quiet movement on the tree-lined streets. At 42, he was one of the most respected names in the country's tech sector. His company, Thompson Digital Solutions, was synonymous with innovation, cybersecurity, and corporate solutions that moved millions. But that morning, as the coffee grew cold in the porcelain cup beside him, Michael wasn't thinking about contracts, investors, or product launches. He was thinking about his mother. Helen was 78 years old with a life story marked by struggle and dignity. A widow for over a decade, she had raised Michael practically on her own after his father abandoned them when he was just a child. She'd worked as a seamstress, then a cook, later as a secretary, always with the ironclad determination to give her son a quality education. Michael never forgot the early mornings when he'd wake up to find her still sewing, her eyes red with exhaustion, but a smile always ready when he appeared at the door of the cramped apartment where they lived in Queens. Every one of his achievements, every step up the ladder, every deal closed was her victory too, and when he was finally able to buy that mansion, the first thing Michael did was bring Helen to live with him. She resisted at first, saying she didn't want to be a bother, that he needed to live his own life, build his own family. But Michael was firm. It wasn't a matter of obligation. It was love. It was gratitude. It was the certainty that everything he had, he owed to that small woman with calloused hands and an immense heart. And Helen accepted, moved to tears, settling into a first-floor bedroom carefully decorated, with a view of the garden she had always dreamed of having. For years, their routine was peaceful and filled with affection. Michael worked long hours and traveled frequently, but he always made time for breakfast with his mother, for conversations on the porch at the end of the day, for Sundays when they would cook lunch together, a meal she insisted on making even when he hired chefs. Helen was his foundation, his safe harbor, the constant reminder of where he came from and what truly mattered. But time, relentless as ever, began to leave its mark. About a year ago, Helen had started showing signs of physical fragility. First, it was a persistent pain in her joints, then a weakness in her legs that made it difficult to move. The doctors were clear: advanced osteoporosis, the natural wear and tear of age, a need for continuous care. Nothing serious enough to require hospitalization, but delicate enough to demand attention. Michael didn't hesitate. He retrofitted the entire house. He installed ramps, reinforced handrails, and a discreet alarm system that allowed his mother to call him at any moment. He hired a physical therapist who came 3 times a week, a nutritionist who designed specific menus, and a professional caregiver, Maria, a competent and warm woman in her 40s who quickly won Helen's trust. His mother's room was transformed into a sanctuary of comfort and safety, a state-of-the-art hospital bed, but with Egyptian cotton sheets and an embroidered quilt, a large-screen TV, but also shelves filled with the books she loved, old novels and biographies. Wide windows let in natural light, but with automatic blinds for when she wanted to rest. Michael personally supervised everything. Every detail mattered. Every decision was made with her well-being in mind. It was in this context of a structured routine and constant care that Isabella entered Michael's life. They met at a charity gala at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, an evening where New York's business elite gathered to discuss social investments. Isabella Reed was a woman who turned heads. Tall, elegant, always dressed with impeccable sophistication, she worked as an image consultant and PR specialist for firms in the financial sector. She had the kind of presence that filled a room, a mix of charm, intelligence, and eloquence that was impressive. She could converse easily about art, economics, international politics. She knew influential people and moved in powerful circles with natural ease. Michael, normally reserved at social events, found himself drawn to her confidence. They started talking and the chemistry was immediate. Isabella showed genuine interest in his company's projects, asked intelligent questions, and offered insights on how to improve the brand's public presence. The following week, they had dinner. Other dates followed. In 3 months, they were officially dating. In 6, Isabella was a constant presence at the Greenwich mansion. At first, everything seemed perfect. Isabella was introduced to Helen and proved to be receptive and attentive. She complimented the room's decor, asked about the older woman's health, and offered to accompany her to medical appointments when Michael couldn't. Helen, always gracious, accepted the new presence in her son's life, with the tranquility of someone who trusts his judgment. Michael was relieved. Finding someone who understood and respected his relationship with his mother wasn't easy. Many women before Isabella had pulled away, precisely because they couldn't accept Helen's central role in his life. But Isabella seemed different. She seemed to understand. The first few months were harmonious. Isabella joined them for family dinners, sat on the porch to chat with Helen while Michael took an urgent call, and brought magazines and chocolates for the older woman. Michael watched these scenes with satisfaction, feeling he had finally found someone with whom he could build a future without having to choose between romantic love and filial love. But something began to change. It was subtle, almost imperceptible at first. Michael couldn't pinpoint exactly when he first noticed it, but it was as if a faint shadow had started to form at the edges of their life together. Helen, who had always been communicative and cheerful, even with her physical limitations, became quieter. When Isabella entered the room, the older woman's expression would shift. Her smile would become restrained, her eyes would look away, and her conversation would turn monosyllabic. Michael found it strange but tried not to make a big deal of it. Maybe it was just fatigue. After all, age brought its own difficulties. Maria, the caregiver, also started acting differently. Once outgoing and relaxed, she became tense in Isabella's presence. She avoided eye contact, answered questions curtly, and always kept herself busy with some task. Michael noticed she would leave the room as soon as Isabella entered, as if trying to avoid some kind of confrontation. When he asked if everything was okay, Maria assured him it was, but the smile didn't reach her eyes. Michael started paying closer attention. He observed that when Isabella thought he wasn't around, she treated his mother and the caregiver differently. Her tone of voice was sharper, her gestures less gentle. One time, walking into the living room unexpectedly, he saw Isabella impatiently push away Helen's hand as she tried to reach for a glass of water. When she noticed Michael's presence, Isabella smiled and picked up the glass, offering it to the older woman with the utmost kindness. But the businessman had seen the previous gesture. He had felt the harshness. He tried to talk to Isabella about it one night, choosing his words carefully. He said he sensed some tension, that he wanted to know if she was feeling overwhelmed, if the routine of caring for Helen was affecting their relationship. Isabella vehemently denied it. She said she adored his mother, that she would never do anything to hurt her, and that if Michael was noticing something, it was because he was tired, stressed from work, seeing things that weren't there. She was so convincing, so confident in her words, that Michael almost believed her. Almost. But his intuition kept whispering. And Michael Thompson hadn't built a tech empire by ignoring his intuition. He knew how to read people, identify inconsistencies, and sense when something didn't add up. And here, in his own home, something definitely didn't add up. One afternoon, returning early from a meeting that ended ahead of schedule, Michael entered quietly through the side door of the house. He didn't announce his arrival. He went up the service stairs, wanting to surprise Isabella, maybe take her out for an impromptu dinner. But as he approached the hallway leading to Helen's room, he heard voices. He stopped. Isabella was speaking, her tone laced with poorly disguised irritation. "You can't keep calling me every 5 minutes for every little thing. I'm not a maid. Do you understand? That's what Maria is here for." Michael felt his entire body tense up. He moved closer, staying out of sight. Helen's voice answered, low, almost inaudible. "I'm sorry, dear, I just needed—" Needed what? To talk about the weather? About how things were different in the old days. "I have things to do, okay?" The silence that followed was heavy. Michael felt anger rise in his chest like lava. He was about to enter the room to confront Isabella right then and there when he heard footsteps. Isabella was leaving. He hid behind a column, watching as she walked down the stairs, phone already in hand, her face completely transformed, smiling as if nothing had happened. Michael entered his mother's room. Helen was sitting in the armchair by the window, her hands trembling in her lap, her eyes fixed on the garden. He knelt beside her, taking her hands gently. "Mom, what happened?" Helen looked at him, and in that gaze Michael saw something that broke his heart. Fear. His mother, the woman who had raised him with courage and determination, was afraid. "Nothing, son, it was nothing. I'm just being a pain, always asking for attention." "Mom, don't say that. You've never been a pain. You're the most important person in my life." She smiled, but it was a sad smile, laden with something Michael couldn't quite decipher. Resignation, perhaps, or the painful realization that she was becoming a burden. "Michael, you need to live your life. Isabella is a good woman, beautiful, smart. You deserve to be happy. Don't let me get in the way of that." "Mom, you never get in the way. Never." But she said no more, just squeezed his hand and turned her gaze back to the garden. Michael stayed there for long minutes, feeling the weight of something much bigger than he could comprehend at that moment. In the following days, he observed more, discreetly. He started noticing small details that had previously escaped him. Isabella always found an excuse not to be alone with Helen for too long. When she had to, she made a point of calling Maria for everything, delegating every task. In phone conversations with friends, when she thought no one was listening, her tone was different. Michael once heard her refer to his mother as the old lady, with an inflection that carried barely disguised contempt. Maria was also visibly more nervous. Michael tried to talk to her again, but the caregiver just said everything was fine, that she was just tired. But her eyes told another story. There was something she wanted to say but couldn't. Or didn't dare. The situation became unbearable when Michael witnessed a scene that left him cold. It was a Saturday morning. He was in his office reviewing some documents when he heard a strange sound from downstairs. He went down quickly and found Helen on the floor near the kitchen trying to get up. Isabella was standing a few feet away, arms crossed, looking at the older woman with an expression that mixed irritation and indifference. "Isabella, what happened? Why didn't you help her?" She turned to him, immediately adjusting her expression. "Michael, I just got here. I found her like this." I was about to call for help. But Michael didn't believe her. There was something about the scene, her posture, the way Helen avoided looking at Isabella, that told a different story. He helped his mother up, took her back to her room, and made sure she was okay. Helen insisted she had tripped on her own, that it was nobody's fault, but the fear was still there, in those eyes he knew so well. That night, Michael couldn't sleep. Lying next to Isabella, who was breathing softly, he stared at the ceiling and processed everything that had been happening. The changes in his mother's behavior, Maria's tension, the inconsistencies in Isabella's actions, the harsh gestures when she thought no one was looking, the cruel words he had overheard. Michael was a man of logic, of data, of concrete evidence, but he was also a man who trusted his instincts, and his instincts were screaming that something was deeply wrong inside his own home, that the woman he planned to marry, the woman sleeping beside him at that very moment, was not who she pretended to be. The question was what to do, how to find out the truth. He couldn't just accuse Isabella without proof. He couldn't rely solely on impressions. He needed certainty. He needed to see with his own eyes, beyond a shadow of a doubt, what was really happening when he wasn't around. And it was then, in the early hours of that morning, that an idea began to form in Michael Thompson's mind. A bold, risky, almost absurd idea. But the more he thought about it, the more it made sense. If Isabella was hiding her true face, If she behaved one way when he was around and another when he was away, then the solution was simple. He needed to be away. Or rather, he needed to make everyone believe he was away, while in reality, he was still there, watching, listening, discovering the truth. He needed to become invisible in his own home. Michael got up silently, went to his office and spent the rest of the morning planning. Every detail had to be perfect, every step meticulously calculated. There could be no mistakes. Because if his suspicions were correct, if Isabella was truly mistreating his mother, then he needed irrefutable proof, and if he was wrong, if it was all just paranoia, then at least he would have the peace of mind of knowing the truth. As the sun began to rise over New York, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange, Michael Thompson made his decision. He was going to disappear. He would announce an international business trip, vanish from the radar, and then, disguised, unrecognizable, he would return to his own home as a stranger. He would return as the Invisible Man, and he would find out once and for all who Isabella Reed really was when she thought no one was watching. The morning progressed, bringing with it the city's usual hustle and bustle. Down below on the streets of Greenwich, people began their routines. But up there, in that silent office, a man was planning something that would change everything. He was planning a trap, not to capture an external enemy, but to unmask a threat that slept in the bed beside him. And Michael knew that once he started this process, there would be no turning back. That the truth, when revealed, would be final. That the price of knowledge could be high, painful, devastating. But the price of ignorance, the price of leaving his mother vulnerable, of letting fear continue to inhabit those eyes he loved so much, that price was far too high. So Michael Thompson prepared himself. He organized the documents, structured the plan, and anticipated every possible complication. And when the day finally dawned completely, when he heard Isabella stirring in the next room, when the house began to awaken to another seemingly normal morning, he knew the countdown had begun. In a few days, he would leave. Or rather, he would pretend to leave, and then he would return as a ghost, as a shadow. As the silent guardian, he should have been all along. He would return to protect the one he loved most. He would return to discover the truth no matter how much it hurt. He would return to see that justice was done. Tuesday dawned with that humid heat, typical of a New York spring, when the sky is heavy but the rain stubbornly refuses to fall. Michael Thompson sat at the breakfast table, wearing an impeccable navy blue suit, his tie perfectly knotted, his Italian shoes gleaming in the soft light filtering through the dining room's French windows. Isabella was beside him, elegant as always, flipping through a design magazine while sipping her black coffee. Helen, brought in by Maria, occupied her usual place at the head of the table, slowly eating a slice of whole wheat toast with jam. Michael looked at the two women before him and took a deep breath before dropping the news he had mentally rehearsed dozens of times during the sleepless night. Isabella, Mum, I need to tell you something. I've been invited to a series of meetings in Singapore. It's a major opportunity, involving Asian investors who could completely change the company's position in the international market. Isabella looked up from her magazine, interested. Singapore? When? I leave tomorrow, and unfortunately I'm going to be incommunicado for security reasons. These are confidential negotiations involving military-grade technology, high-level encryption. I won't be able to use my personal phone, social media, anything. I'll be staying in a hotel with strict security protocols. It's a pain, but it's necessary. Helen looked at her son with concern. How long will you be gone, my son? 2 weeks, maybe a little longer. But you'll be fine, Mom. Maria is here, the house is in order, and Isabella will take care of everything, right? Isabella smiled, taking Michael's hand in a gesture that seemed affectionate. Of course, honey, don't worry, I'll take care of everything here. Your mother won't want for anything. Michael watched her smile, the calculated delicacy of her touch, and felt a chill run down his spine. This was exactly what he needed to see. How Isabella would act when she thought he was on the other side of the world, unreachable, unable to interfere. Throughout that day, Michael meticulously executed each step of his plan. He made a point of mentioning the trip to all the household staff, the housekeeper, the gardener, the security guard at the gate. He told his personal driver, Mr. Davis, that he wouldn't need his services for the next few weeks, as the company would provide transportation in Singapore. He sent emails to his work team, informing them of his temporary absence, delegating responsibilities, and stating that he should only be contacted in extreme emergencies. He posted a generic photo from JFK Airport on his social media with a caption about new professional challenges. Every detail was designed to create the perfect illusion that Michael Thompson was leaving the country. But the most delicate part of the plan involved a discreet visit Michael made that Tuesday afternoon. He left the house claiming to have one last in-person meeting before his trip and drove to a small special effects studio in Brooklyn, a place that primarily served the theater and film industry. There he worked with a professional makeup artist who specialized in transformations. I need to be unrecognizable but natural. Nothing over the top, like I'm just another person, someone ordinary, who goes unnoticed. The makeup artist, a middle-aged man named Frank, studied Michael's face with professional attention. We'll work with a prosthetic beard, well applied, in a slightly grayer shade than your natural hair. Glasses with thick frames will completely change the structure of your face. A discreet baseball cap will hide part of your forehead and hair, and we can darken your eyebrows a bit, make them thicker. With these changes, even someone who knows you well will have a hard time recognizing you. Michael approved. Over the next few hours, they tried different combinations until they found the perfect look. The salt and pepper prosthetic beard covered his chin and part of his cheeks. The dark, rectangular framed glasses completely changed the expression in his eyes, and the simple black cap concealed his hairline. When Frank finished and Michael looked in the mirror, he saw a stranger. An average man, the kind you pass on the street and forget a second later. Perfect. Frank taught him how to apply and remove the prosthetic beard himself, provided special adhesives, and gave detailed maintenance instructions. Michael bought duplicates of everything, paid in cash, thanked him, and left with a discreet backpack containing his transformation kit. Back at the mansion, Michael went straight to his room, locked the door, and organized everything he would need. Simple clothes, jeans, plain t-shirts, a gray sweatshirt, basic black sneakers. No visible brands, nothing that would draw attention. He packed everything in a small suitcase that he hid in the back of his office closet. Then, he prepared the fake documents he had obtained through a completely trustworthy contact, a former employee who worked in data security and had connections in the digital underground. They weren't for official use, just a cover identity. Mark Miller, 45, a rideshare driver. He even had a fake driver's license and a photo ID badge. That night, Michael had one last dinner with Isabella and Helen before his supposed trip. Isabella was particularly cheerful, talking about her plans for the coming weeks, renovations she wanted to make in the living room, a charity event she was planning to organize. Michael listened to it all, observing her gestures, the excitement in her eyes. Was she happy because he was leaving? Because she would have free rein to do whatever she wanted? Helen was quiet, eating little, her gaze distant. Michael held her hand for a moment. "Mom, I'm going to miss you, but it's just for a little while. And as soon as I get back, we'll take that trip you wanted, remember? We'll visit that country house in the Berkshires." She smiled, but it was a faint smile. "Godspeed, my son. Be careful." "I always am, Mom. You know that." Isabella stood up and kissed Michael on the cheek. "I'll miss you too, honey. But it's for the good of the company, right? You'll be back before we know it, and we'll be celebrating the new contracts." Michael nodded, hugged her, smelled the expensive perfume she wore, felt the soft texture of her silk dress. And he wondered how it was possible for someone to seem so perfect on the outside and hide something so dark within. On Wednesday morning, Michael staged his departure. He dressed formally, took the suitcase packed with travel clothes, said his goodbyes, kissed his mother for a long time, hugged Isabella, and got into the car that was supposedly taking him to the airport. But instead of going to JFK, the driver, following prior instructions, took him to a discreet hotel near Park Avenue. Michael checked in under a false name, paid in cash, and went up to a simple room on the 10th floor. There, finally alone, he took off the suit, carefully put everything away, and began his transformation. He applied the prosthetic beard with the special medical adhesive, adjusting each hair to make it look natural. He put on the glasses, the cap, and dressed in the faded jeans and plain grey t-shirt. He slipped on the worn sneakers. He looked at himself in the bathroom mirror and smiled ironically. Mark Miller looked back at him. An ordinary, tired, invisible man. Perfect. Michael spent that day and the next in the hotel, studying, planning, rehearsing. He downloaded a rideshare app, created an account with the fake name, and took a photo in his disguise. Fortunately, there wasn't a strict in-person verification process for partner drivers on some of the smaller platforms. His registration was approved. He was now officially a rideshare driver. On Friday morning, 3 days after his supposed departure for Singapore, Michael left the hotel before dawn. He walked to a private parking garage where he had left a car rented under his fake identity, a white Toyota Camry, the most common model on the streets of New York, completely anonymous. He drove slowly toward Greenwich, his heart pounding as he got closer to his own home. He parked 2 blocks away and watched. The sun was beginning to light up the treetops. The streets were still quiet. He took a deep breath, picked up his phone, and called the mansion's number. The housekeeper, Mrs. Gable, answered. "Good morning, Thompson residence." Michael slightly altered his voice, making it deeper, with a different intonation. "Good morning. This is Mark from Quick Ride. I was hired to provide exclusive transportation for this residence for the next few weeks. Mr. Thompson arranged everything before he left. Can I stop by to get my instructions?" There was a pause. Mrs. Gable sounded confused. "Oh yes, I think Mrs. Reed mentioned something about that. Let me get her." Michael waited, his heart thumping. Then came Isabella's voice, still sleepy but already with that commanding tone she liked to use. "Hello? Who is this?" "Good morning, Mrs. Reed. Mark Miller, a driver with Quick Ride. I was hired to be on call for the house while Mr. Davis is on vacation. Can I come by to learn the routine and get my assignments?" Isabella hesitated for a second, but then her voice became firmer. "Oh, right. Michael mentioned something about that before he left, but I'd forgotten. Okay, you can come, but you'll be staying in the staff quarters, you hear? You're not to be entering the main house." "No problem, Mom. I'll be there in 15 minutes. Michael hung up and let out a tense sigh. First step complete. Isabella had bought the story. Now came the hardest part, entering his own home without being recognized. 15 minutes later, he rang the bell at the gate. The security guard, a young man named Evan, came to answer. Michael rolled down the car window, keeping the cap pulled low over his eyes. "Morning, boss. Mark Miller. Driver? Mrs. Reed is expecting me." Evan checked a clipboard, nodded, and opened the gate. Michael drove in slowly, parking near the side garage where the staff quarters were located. He got out of the car, slung his backpack over his shoulder, and walked to the main door. Maria, the caregiver, opened it. "Good morning." "Good morning, Mrs. Reed." "She's just finishing getting ready. You can wait in there." Michael walked in and felt a strange, almost surreal sensation. He was in his own house, but as a stranger. He saw everything with new eyes. Maria led him to a small waiting area near the kitchen, a space normally used by service providers. He sat on a simple sofa and waited, observing the movements of the house. He heard voices coming from upstairs. He recognized his mother's voice, low, asking for something. Then Isabella's voice, impatient. "Helen, I don't have time right now. Maria will help you in a bit." Michael clenched his fists, but controlled himself. He couldn't react. Not yet. 5 minutes later, Isabella came downstairs. She was impeccable, wearing black slacks and a white silk blouse, her hair tied in an elegant bun. She looked at Michael, with the quick, evaluative expression people use with service staff. "So you're Mark?" Michael stood up, maintaining a slightly stooped posture, his voice altered. "Yes, ma'am. A pleasure." "All right. Here's how it's going to work. You'll be available from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. If I need you outside those hours, you let me know in advance if you can do it or not. You'll stay in the quarters out back. There's a simple studio apartment. You'll drive us wherever we need to go, but you'll also help with some things around the house, understand? Small deliveries, things like that." "Understood, Mrs. Reed." And one more thing. Michael's mother lives here. She's elderly, has limitations. So no making noise, no wandering around the main house unnecessarily. You stay in your place, do your job, and that's it. Clear? Crystal clear, ma'am. Isabella nodded, already losing interest. Maria will show you to the apartment and give you the keys. If you need anything, talk to Mrs. Gable, the housekeeper. And she walked away, her heels clicking on the hardwood floor, leaving a cloud of perfume and indifference in her wake. Michael was led by Maria to the studio apartment out back, a small but comfortable space he himself had renovated years ago to accommodate temporary staff. It had a twin bed, a tiny bathroom, a desk with a chair, and a small kitchenette. Maria handed him the keys, explained where the laundry room was if he needed it, and left in a hurry. Alone in that space, Michael sat on the bed and looked around. There he was, the owner of this mansion, hidden in a staff apartment, disguised, invisible. It was surreal, but it was also necessary. For the rest of that morning, Michael listened intently to the sounds of the house. He heard Isabella leave in her own car, probably for an appointment. He heard voices in the kitchen, the housekeeper talking with Maria, and he heard, very softly, coming from Helen's first-floor room, the sound of stifled crying. That sound shattered him, but he knew he couldn't act yet. He needed to observe, gather evidence, and understand the full extent of what was happening. In the afternoon, he was called by the housekeeper to pick up Isabella from a high-end spa in the city. He drove there, parked, and waited. When Isabella came out, she got into the car talking on her phone, not even glancing at him. "No, honey, it's impossible. She calls me all the time. It's such a pain. Michael doesn't even see it. He works too much. But I'm the one who has to put up with it." Michael drove in silence, pretending not to listen, but every word was a dagger. I know, but as soon as we're married, I'm going to handle it. There are specialized facilities, you know, places where they take good care of them, far from here. I can't live my life with her attached at the hip." The conversation continued in this vein until they got home. Isabella got out of the car without a thank you, without even acknowledging his presence. Michael parked, went back to his apartment, and sat on the bed, his hands shaking with suppressed rage. So that was the plan. Marry him and then put his mother in a home. Send her away, isolate her, remove Helen from his life under the pretext of professional care. Michael felt bile rise in his throat, but it was still too soon. He needed more. He needed to hear and see everything, and over. The next few days, that's exactly what he did. As the invisible driver, Michael moved through the house, always discreet, always in character. He drove Isabella to her appointments, overheard revealing phone calls, and witnessed scenes that confirmed all his worst suspicions. He saw Isabella treat Maria with contempt whenever she thought he wasn't around. He saw her deliberately ignore Helen's requests, leaving the older woman waiting for water, for a blanket, for company. He saw the fear growing in his mother's eyes with each passing day. And on a Tuesday afternoon, exactly 1 week after his supposed trip, Michael witnessed something that made him make a final decision. He was in the kitchen, helping Mrs. Gable carry in some groceries, when he heard an argument in the hallway. He approached silently. Isabella was facing Maria, her finger pointed, her voice low but filled with menace. "You're not going to tell him anything when he gets back, do you hear me? Because if you open your mouth, I will make sure you lose this job and never work for a family in this town again. I have connections, Maria. I can destroy your reputation with one phone call." Maria was visibly terrified, her hands trembling. I just want to do my job right, Mrs. Reed. Take care of Mrs. Thompson, then take care of her quietly. And if I tell you to do something, you do it without question. Understood?" Maria nodded, her head bowed in defeat. Isabella turned and nearly bumped into Michael, who was pretending to just be passing through the hall. "What are you doing here?" "Sorry, Mrs. Reed, I was just bringing in the groceries." "Well, stay in your area, and don't listen to other people's conversations." "Yes, ma'am." She walked off, and Michael looked at Maria, who had tears in her eyes. He wanted to say something, to reveal who he was, to protect her, but it wasn't time yet. That night, alone in his apartment, Michael made his decision. He had seen enough. He had heard enough. Isabella wasn't just negligent or impatient. She was cruel, manipulative, and actively threatening the people who cared for his mother. It was time to end this. It was time to act, and he knew exactly how. Isabella was planning a dinner for the following week, an elegant event with select guests to publicly announce their wedding date. Michael had heard her organizing it all on the phone. It would be the perfect occasion. He would be there, as a driver, as a staff member helping to serve, and at the perfect moment, he would take off the disguise, and he would reveal everything. The following days dragged on with torturous slowness for Michael. Every morning he woke up in the small apartment out back, put on his disguise with meticulous care, and assumed the role of Mark Miller, the invisible driver. And every day brought new revelations that broke his heart into smaller and smaller pieces. On Thursday, he witnessed Isabella talking on the phone with a friend while he drove her to a lunch meeting near Wall Street. The traffic was heavy, and Isabella, thinking he was just another disinterested driver, spoke freely. "No, it's not that bad. The house is gorgeous, the money never runs out, and Michael is attentive when he's around. The problem is the old woman. Seriously, Marina, she's like a shadow, always needing something, always with that pitiful look on her face. She looks at me with those eyes like I'm obligated to keep her company." Michael gripped the steering. Wheel tightly, keeping his eyes fixed on the traffic. "I know it sounds cruel, but it's the truth. When we get married, I'll figure something out. There's a clinic in upstate New York, super discreet, with 24-hour nurses. She'll be well cared for, far away, and I'll finally have the house to myself and him. Michael will complain at first, but he'll understand it's for the best." The conversation continued in this tone for a few more minutes. When they arrived at the restaurant, Isabella got out without even a backward glance, leaving Michael alone in the car, trying to control the fury boiling inside him. It wasn't just negligence, it was premeditated. Isabella had a clear, structured plan to get rid of Helen as soon as she legally secured her place in the family through marriage. And Michael, if he hadn't found out in time, would have handed his mother over to her. That same evening, something even more serious happened. Michael was in the kitchen, helping Mrs. Gable organize some supplies, when he heard a strange noise from the staircase connecting the ground floor to the second. A muffled cry, followed by a dull thud. He dropped everything and ran. Maria was lying on the landing, moaning in pain, clutching her ankle. Michael got there first, kneeling beside her. "What happened?" Maria looked at him with wide eyes, filled with pain and fear, a fear that went beyond the fall. I slipped. The stairs they were wet." But when Michael looked at the steps, he didn't see water. He saw something different, an oily, almost imperceptible substance spread across 2 or 3 strategic steps. His engineer's brain processed the information quickly. This was no accident. It was sabotage. Isabella appeared at the top of the stairs, her expression carefully composed into one of concern. "My God, what happened?" "She fell. I'm calling an ambulance." "Don't overreact. It's probably just a sprain. Maria, can you get up?" Michael ignored Isabella and was already on his phone, dialing 911. Maria tried to stand, but groaned in pain with every movement. Her ankle was visibly swollen. The ambulance arrived 20 minutes later. The paramedics assessed Maria and determined she needed to go to the hospital for x-rays. She likely had a fracture. Michael, still in his role as the driver, offered to accompany her, but Isabella was quick to refuse. "That's not necessary, Mark. You stay here. You have to help with things around the house. Mrs. Gable will go with Maria." Michael had no choice but to obey. He watched Maria being taken away, her expression a mix of physical pain and emotional anguish. And when the ambulance left, when Isabella went back inside as if nothing had happened, Michael discreetly went up the stairs and examined the steps more closely. He ran his finger over the surface. Oily, definitely intentional. And only 2 people had gone up those stairs before Maria's fall: Isabella and the caregiver, herself. The conclusion was obvious. Michael walked down the stairs, his blood boiling. Isabella had crossed a dangerous line. This was no longer just psychological abuse. It was something that could have caused serious harm, even... He couldn't complete the thought. He had to end this. fast. With Maria hospitalized, Helen's situation became even more precarious. Isabella took over the older woman's direct care, and Michael, from his post as the invisible observer, watched it all with growing horror. On Friday morning he was sweeping the hallway near Helen's room when he heard Isabella's voice, cold and sharp. "You need to stop complaining. I brought your food, it's on the tray. Eat it or don't, that's your problem." "Isabella, dear, I was just saying it's very salty. My doctor told me to avoid." "Your doctor isn't here. Eat what you're given. I'm not going to make special food just because you're being picky." Michael heard the sound of the door slamming. Seconds later, Isabella walked past him in the hall without even a glance in his direction. He waited a few moments and then, with a heavy heart, knocked gently on Helen's door. "Yes?" He entered. His mother was sitting in the armchair, the tray of food untouched in her lap, her eyes red. When she saw the unknown driver enter, she tried to compose herself, quickly wiping away her tears. "I'm sorry, sir. I was just—" Michael wanted to scream, to rip off the disguise right there, to hug her, to protect her. But he knew he couldn't. It was only a few more days. He had to hold on. "Are you all right, ma'am?" he asked, keeping his voice altered. Helen forced a weak smile. "I'm fine, thank you. I just miss my son. He's traveling. He's Sano? And when he's not here, everything is more difficult." Michael felt his throat tighten. He walked over, picked up the tray, and looked at the food. It was indeed very salty, unsuitable for someone with her dietary restrictions. "Let me take this and bring you something else, something lighter." "You don't have to, sir. I don't want to be any trouble." "It's no trouble at all. I'll be right back." He took the tray to the kitchen, prepared a simple plate of rice with steamed vegetables and some grilled chicken, all without salt. He returned to the room and handed it to Helen, who looked at him with sincere gratitude. "Thank you so much. You're very kind. What's your name again?" "Mark, ma'am." "Mark. I'll remember that. Thank you, Mark." He left with his heart in pieces, but also with an even greater determination. The woman who had raised him with so much love, who had fought so hard for him, was being humiliated, neglected, and mistreated in the very home he had built for her. And that was going to end. The weekend was an exercise in self-control for Michael. Isabella spent most of her time on the phone or out with friends, leaving Helen practically alone. Michael took every opportunity to check on his mother, always maintaining his disguise, always presenting himself as just a helpful employee. On Sunday evening, Maria returned from the hospital. She was on crutches, her ankle bandaged, but she insisted on coming back to work. Isabella surprisingly didn't object. Perhaps she realized that caring for Helen required more patience than she was willing to give. Michael managed to speak briefly with Maria when she arrived. He helped her up the steps to the staff quarters where she also lived. "Maria, are you sure you're well enough to work?" She looked at him with a tired, defeated expression. "I have to work, Mark. I have bills to pay, kids to support. I can't lose this job." "What if you're in danger here?" Maria hesitated, her gaze shifting. I just do my job. I take care of Mrs. Thompson. That's all that matters." But Michael saw the fear in her eyes. Maria knew something. Maybe she even suspected the fall wasn't an accident. But she was trapped, a hostage to financial need and Isabella's veiled threats. Monday dawned with a heavy sky promising a storm. And it was on that day that Isabella finally began preparations for the dinner that would publicly announce their wedding date. Michael heard her on the phone with the event planner, detailing every aspect of the evening. It would be the following Friday, just 5 days away. Select guests, 20 people in total, including some of Michael's business partners and important figures from New York's corporate world. A sophisticated menu prepared by a chef hired especially for the occasion. Elegant decorations, French champagne, everything to create the perfect setting for the big announcement. "It's going to be the perfect night, Claire. Everything has to be impeccable. It's the moment I formalize my place in Michael's life, you understand? After this, things are going to change." Michael heard this while pretending to clean the car in the garage. Things are going to change. Yes, they were, but not in the way Isabella imagined. Throughout that week, Michael watched the preparations. He saw Isabella hiring florists, tasting dishes with the chef, selecting wines. He saw her at the jeweler, trying on expensive engagement rings. He saw her rehearsing the speech she would give in front of the guests. And he also saw how she treated Helen when she thought no one was paying attention. On Wednesday, he witnessed a scene that almost made him break his cover right then and there. He was passing through the hallway when he heard raised voices coming from Helen's room. He approached silently. "I'm not going to the dinner. I don't feel well." "Oh, you don't? How convenient. On my special night, you decide to get sick." "Isabella, it's not that. I really don't feel well. My legs are hurting a lot and—" "Your legs always hurt, Helen, but on Friday you will be there sitting at the table, smiling and behaving. Because if you're not, I will make sure Michael knows you're boycotting our wedding. And then we'll see who he chooses. You or me." The silence that followed was devastating. Michael clenched his fists, breathing deeply to keep from storming in and ending it all right then. Finally, he heard Helen's weak voice. "I'll be there." "Good. And you'll pretend to be happy. Understood?" "I understand." Isabella left the room and walked past Michael without seeing him, absorbed in her phone. He waited a moment and then entered Helen's room. She was crying silently, her head bowed, her hands trembling in her lap. "Ma'am?" She looked up at him, startled, quickly wiping away her tears. "Mark, I'm sorry. I was just a little tired." Michael knelt beside her, keeping his voice disguised but infusing it with all the gentleness he could muster. "You don't have to pretend with me. I see how she treats you. I hear the things she says." Helen looked at him with surprise, and then with a deep sadness. You heard?" "I heard." She began to cry again, this time without trying to hide it. "I don't know what to do, Mark. She's my son's fiancée. He likes her. He's going to marry her, and I don't want to be a problem. I don't want him to have to choose. But I'm scared. I'm so scared." Michael felt tears threatening to fall from behind the dark glasses of his disguise. He held her hands gently. "You are not a problem. And your son knows exactly what kind of person she is. He will protect you. I promise." Helen looked at him, confused. "How can you promise that?" Michael almost revealed everything right. There. Almost took off the disguise, hugged his mother, told her he had been there all along, that he would never abandon her. But he managed to control himself. The dinner was only 2 days away. He just had to hold on a little longer. "Because I know he loves you more than anything in this world, and people who love like that don't let anything bad happen to the ones they love." Helen squeezed his hand, and in that squeeze there was gratitude, relief, hope. "Thank you, Mark. You have a very good heart." He left with his heart shattered, but also with the absolute certainty that he was doing the right thing. Thursday passed in a blur of final preparations. The house was invaded by florists, decorators, and catering staff. Isabella supervised everything with a critical eye, ensuring every detail was perfect. Michael watched from a distance, helping where needed, always invisible, always present. That night, alone in his studio apartment, he reviewed his plan one last time. On Friday, during the dinner, he would be there as a staff member helping to serve. At the perfect moment, just as Isabella was about to make the official announcement, he would reveal himself. He would take off the disguise in front of all the guests and confront Isabella with everything he had witnessed. It would be dramatic, painful, embarrassing, but it would be just. And Michael Thompson had always believed in justice. Friday dawned beautifully, the sky clear after the week's storms. It was one of those rare days in New York when the air is transparent and you can see far into the distance to the mountains that surround the city. Michael woke up early, put on his disguise for the last time, and mentally prepared himself for what was to come. Throughout the day, he helped with the final preparations. He watched the tables being set up in the mansion's garden, covered with white linen tablecloths and decorated with sophisticated floral arrangements. He saw the chairs being arranged, the sound system being tested, the decorative lights being installed. and he saw Isabella, radiant, wearing a long champagne-colored dress, her hair in perfect waves, her makeup flawless. She was stunning and completely unaware of what was about to happen. At 7 in the evening, the first guests began to arrive. Businessmen in expensive suits, women in designer dresses, all with polite smiles and champagne flutes in hand. Isabella greeted them with rehearsed charm, introducing herself as the future Mrs. Thompson. Michael circulated among the guests, serving hors d'oeuvres, refilling glasses, invisible in his simple staff uniform. Some of the attendees were people he knew personally, business partners, project collaborators. None of them recognized him. The disguise was perfect. Helen was brought out by Maria and seated in a discreet chair in the corner of the garden. She was pale, visibly uncomfortable, but playing the part Isabella had demanded of her. At 8:30, after everyone had arrived and dinner was being served, Isabella stood up. She picked up a champagne flute and tapped it gently with a spoon, drawing everyone's attention. "Dear friends, thank you so much for being here on this very special night for me. As you know, Michael and I have been together for some time, and this relationship has been one of the greatest joys of my life." Michael was standing near the door to the house, watching. His heart was racing. It was almost time. "And so, I wanted to take this wonderful evening to make an official announcement. Michael is away on business, but he arranged everything before he left. We are getting married. The date is set for March 15th of next year, and you are all invited to celebrate with us." Polite applause, smiles, glasses being raised. And it was at that moment that Michael began to walk toward the center of the garden. Isabella continued speaking, beaming. "This house, this family, this future we are building together, it means everything to me." Michael stopped a few feet from her. With deliberate movements, he took off the cap. He took off the glasses, and with a firm tug he removed the prosthetic beard. The silence was instantaneous. Isabella looked at him, and the champagne flute slipped from her hand, shattering on the ground. The garden of the Greenwich mansion, moments before, filled with elegant conversation and polite laughter, plunged into a silence so absolute you could hear the rustling of leaves in the wind. 20 pairs of eyes were fixed on Michael Thompson, who had just emerged from behind the disguise of Mark Miller, the invisible driver. Isabella was frozen, her face drained of all color, her mouth agape in stunned disbelief. The shards of the champagne glass glittered on the ground, around her feet, reflecting the garden's decorative lights. She tried to speak, but no sound came out. Michael took another step toward her, his voice firm and clear, carrying an authority that made everyone in the garden instinctively sit up straighter in their chairs. "Good evening, everyone. I apologize for the dramatic surprise, but there are things that need to be said, and this is the only way to ensure everyone hears the truth." One of the guests, a business partner of Michael's named Edward Miller, stood up, confused. "Michael, but weren't you in Singapore? What? How? I never went." "To Singapore, Edward. I announced the trip, yes, but I never left New York. On the contrary, I've spent the last 2 weeks living here, in this house, disguised as the driver you all saw circulating tonight." Murmurs of shock rippled through the guests. Some glanced at Isabella, who was still motionless like a statue. Michael continued, his gaze locked on her. "I did this because I began to suspect that things were not as they seemed. My mother, Helen—" He gestured to where the older woman was sitting, tears now streaming silently down her face. "Started behaving differently. Withdrawn, frightened, and I needed to know why." Isabella finally found her voice, still trembling, trying to laugh but producing a strangled sound. "Michael, this is ridiculous. Are you having a breakdown? Have you gone insane? Sneaking into your own house in disguise, It's what, Isabella? Illegal. An invasion of privacy." Michael's voice was calm, but there was steel in it. "This is my house. Every inch of it belongs to me. And what I discovered here, what I saw and heard during these 2 weeks, was something I never would have imagined possible." He turned to the guests, who were now completely engrossed, some discreetly pulling out their phones. "During this time, I witnessed Isabella treating my mother with a level of cruelty and contempt that still shocks me. I heard her refer to Helen as dead weight, as a burden, as someone she wanted to get rid of as soon as she secured her place in this family through marriage. Isabella took a step forward, her voice rising. That's a lie. I have always treated your mother with respect. I always took care of her when you weren't here. Took care of her? Michael laughed bitterly. You left her waiting hours for a glass of water. You served her food that was far too salty for someone with her medical restrictions. You spoke to her in a harsh, sharp, threatening manner. And worst of all, he paused, his voice thick with restrained emotion, you threatened Maria, our caregiver, telling her you would destroy her professional reputation if she told me anything. Maria, who was standing near Helen, sobbed audibly. A few guests looked from her to Isabella, starting to piece the puzzle together. Isabella tried another tactic, her voice growing shriller, more desperate. Michael, please, you're misinterpreting things. I was stressed, overwhelmed. Taking care of an elderly person isn't easy, and you were always traveling, always busy. Maybe I was impatient a few times, but that doesn't mean I... Doesn't mean what? Michael cut her off, taking another step. That you didn't plan to convince me to put my mother in a nursing home as soon as we were married? Because I heard you saying exactly that on the phone. A clinic in upstate New York. Super discreet. Far from here. So you could have the house all to yourself. The guests were now reacting. Openly, some shaking their heads in disapproval, others whispering among themselves. Isabella's social facade was crumbling before everyone's eyes. One of the guests, a businesswoman named Beatrice Cole, whom Michael knew from charity events, stood up. Isabella, is this true? Isabella turned to her, her hands shaking. No, I mean, I may have mentioned options for professional care, but it wasn't. I never wanted to. You also suggested in a phone conversation, Michael continued relentlessly, that if you could, you'd lock my mother in the trunk of a car to see how quiet she'd get in the dark. The entire garden seemed to gasp at once. That was beyond cruel, it was monstrous. Isabella turned pale, then red, her expression shifting between shock and rage. You can't prove any of this. It's just your word against mine. You're trying to humiliate me because you're jealous, because you can't stand to see your mother having to share your attention. It was Maria who spoke up, her voice low but firm. It's not just his word. I heard it too. I saw it. And I was too scared to speak up. Mrs. Gable, the housekeeper who had been watching from the doorway, also stepped forward. I saw things too. The food being served improperly, the mistreatment. But I didn't know who to talk to. I was afraid of losing my job. Isabella looked around, realizing she was cornered, that all her defenses had fallen. She tried one last gambit, pointing a trembling finger at Michael. This is all illegal. You spied on me. You deceived me. This is an invasion of privacy. I'm going to sue you. I'll take half of everything you own. Michael smiled, but it was a joyless smile. You're going to sue? Interesting, because I checked with my lawyers before I did any of this. This is my property. I had every right to be here, in disguise or not. And as for taking half of everything I own, he pulled some papers from his pocket, unfolding them. These are the power of attorney documents you convinced me to sign 3 months ago, giving you access to certain bank accounts and assets in case of an emergency. They have all been revoked. I signed the revocation yesterday, in person, at the notary's office. Isabella snatched the papers from his hand, reading them frantically, realizing it was true. When she looked up, there was pure hatred in her eyes. You're a monster. You pretended to love me, pretended to trust me, and the whole time you were setting a trap for me. I did love you, Isabella. Or I loved who I thought you were. But you were the one pretending. Pretending to be kind, caring, understanding, and the whole time you were planning to get rid of the most important person in my life. So you tell me, who's the monster here? The silence that followed was brutal. Isabella looked around, seeing the condemnation on the faces of everyone present. Her reputation, so carefully constructed, was destroyed. In social circles like this, a ruined reputation was worse than any financial loss. I want you to leave my house, Michael said, his voice low but final. Now. I'm not going. You are. Because if you don't leave on your own, I'll call security and have you forcibly removed. And believe me, Isabella, I have all the patience in the world to watch that happen. Isabella stared at him for a long moment, and then something inside her broke. Tears of rage and humiliation began to stream down her face, ruining her perfect makeup. "You'll regret this. You'll realize you made a mistake, that I was the best thing that ever happened to you, and by then it will be too late." If this is the best thing that could have happened to me, then I pity anyone who believes that. Isabella let out a cry of frustration, threw the papers on the ground, and stormed toward the house. A few minutes later, the sound of a car speeding away down the street could be heard. Michael stood in the center of the garden, breathing heavily, processing what had just happened. Then he felt a gentle hand on his arm. He turned. It was Helen, supported by Maria, her eyes still wet, but shining with something he hadn't seen in weeks: relief. "My son." Michael knelt before her, holding her hands. "Mom, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry it took me so long to see. I'm sorry I let you go through this." "You didn't know, son. And when you found out, you did what had to be done. I should have realized sooner. I should have trusted my gut from the beginning." Helen caressed his face tenderly. "The important thing is that you're here now, and she's gone. It's over." Michael hugged his mother gently, feeling the tears finally roll down his own face. Behind him, the guests began to stand. Some approached to shake his hand to express their support. Others discreetly called their drivers and left, uncomfortable with the whole situation. Edward Miller, his partner, placed a hand on Michael's shoulder. "Man, that was intense. But you did the right thing. And if you need anything, you can count on me." "Thanks, Edward. I really appreciate that." Gradually, the garden emptied. Maria helped Helen back to her room, and Michael was left alone for a few moments, looking around at the party scene that now seemed so surreal. The tables were still set, the food untouched, the champagne glasses half full. It was then that Mrs. Gable approached, her expression worried. "Mr. Thompson, there's someone at the door. A man says he needs to speak with you urgently." "Who?" He said he's your father." Michael felt as if the ground had vanished from beneath his feet. His father. Robert Thompson. The man who had abandoned them when Michael was only 7. The man who had never offered an explanation, never paid child support, never called to see how they were. The man Michael had learned to hate for years until, finally, he simply ceased to matter. "My father is here?" "Yes, sir. At the front door." Michael took a deep breath, trying to process yet another twist. With everything that had happened that night, the last thing he expected was the appearance of a ghost from his past. "You can let him in." Minutes later, a man in his 60s walked into the garden. Graying hair, a slightly stooped posture, simple but clean clothes. Robert Thompson looked like he had aged far beyond the years that had passed. When he saw Michael, he stopped, his eyes widening. "Michael, what do you want?" Michael's voice came out colder than he intended. Robert winced but continued. "I needed to talk to you. It's about her. Isabella." Michael frowned. "What do you have to do with Isabella?" Robert approached slowly, as if afraid Michael would send him away at any moment. "She came to me about 3 weeks ago. She said you were becoming unstable, that you were making bad decisions at the company, that you were putting the family fortune at risk. She wanted me to file a lawsuit to transfer part of the assets into a protective trust managed by her." Michael felt his blood run cold. "She did what?" "She had documents, contracts. It was all very well prepared. She said you were under too much pressure, that you needed help, and that as your father I had a legal right to intervene." "And you? What did you do?" Robert lowered his head, ashamed. I almost signed. The money was very tempting, son. She promised a generous cut, but something didn't feel right. So I hired a private investigator to look into the situation, and he found out you were perfectly fine, that the company was solid, that there was no instability. That's when I realized she was trying to use me." Michael ran a hand through his hair, incredulous at the depth of Isabella's scheme. "So she wasn't just planning to get rid of my mother. She was planning to take control of my fortune using you as a legal tool. It seems so. And I know I have no right to ask for anything after everything I did. Or rather, everything I didn't do. But I had to warn you. I needed you to know. Michael looked at the man before him. There were so many conflicting emotions: anger for the years of absence, gratitude for the warning, sadness for what could have been and never was. You're right. You have no right to ask for anything. And I'm not ready to forgive decades of abandonment just because you did one decent thing. But thank you for warning me. That probably saved me from an even worse situation. Robert nodded, his eyes welling up. I understand. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry for everything, and that your mother, she was always an incredible woman. I was a fool to leave her. Yes, you were. Is she okay? She is now, after spending weeks being mistreated by the person I brought into this house. Robert flinched, recognizing the pain in his son's voice. I'll go. I just wanted to warn you in person. Good luck, son, with everything. And he left, disappearing into the night as quietly as he had appeared, leaving Michael alone with his thoughts. The days that followed were about rebuilding. Michael hired a new team of caregivers for Helen, but made sure Maria stayed on as supervisor, with a substantial salary increase and full autonomy to structure the care in the best way possible. He officially promoted her to the position of Family Wellness Manager, giving her resources and authority. Maria flourished in her new role. Her ankle healed completely, and with Isabella's toxic presence gone, she returned to being the dedicated and caring professional she had always been. Helen, in turn, began to get the light back in her eyes. The laughter returned. The conversations on the porch resumed. The house became a home again. Michael also went through changes. The experience of living as someone else, of seeing his own life from the outside, had given him a perspective he never imagined he'd have. He realized he worked too much, delegated important things too often, and trusted appearances too easily. And it was during one of these reflections on a Sunday afternoon, while having coffee with Helen in the garden, that she asked a question that would change everything again. Son, what are you going to do now, after everything that's happened? Michael looked at her, at that face marked by time but still so beautiful in his eyes. What do you mean, Mom? With everything you've learned, with the pain you saw, not just mine, but Maria's, Mrs. Gable's, how many other elderly people are going through something similar right now? The question hung in the air, and Michael felt something ignite within him, an idea, a purpose. In the following weeks, he began to research. He discovered that elder abuse was far more common than he had imagined, that there were thousands of Helens all over the country, suffering in silence, afraid to report it, not knowing where to turn, that the protection system was flawed, underfunded, and overwhelmed, and he decided to do something about it. 3 months after that dramatic night in the garden, Michael inaugurated the Helen Thompson Institute for Elder Protection and Well-Being, a spacious modern facility equipped with the best in care and monitoring technology, but also with something no technology could replace: human warmth. The Institute offered everything from temporary shelter for at-risk seniors to caregiver training, visitation programs to combat loneliness, free legal assistance for abuse cases, and awareness campaigns about aging with dignity. Michael invested a significant portion of his personal fortune in the project, but he also managed to attract investors and government support. At the opening ceremony, with Helen by his side cutting the symbolic ribbon, Michael gave a speech that moved everyone present. This institute is named after the strongest woman I know. My mother, Helen, went through something no one should ever have to endure. She was mistreated, neglected, and threatened in the very home I built for her, and it happened because I wasn't paying attention, because I blindly trusted someone who didn't deserve my trust, because I thought love and care were things that could be delegated. He paused, his voice thick with emotion. I learned that you can't delegate affection, that physical presence is not the same as emotional presence, and that our elders, the people who built the world we live in today, deserve more than our scraps of attention. They deserve dignity, respect, and genuine care. And that is what this institute will strive to promote every single day, without exception. The applause was long and heartfelt. Helen, beside him, was crying openly, but they were tears of pride and joy. In the months that followed, the institute grew beyond expectations. It served hundreds of seniors, trained dozens of caregivers, and resolved complex cases of abuse and neglect. It became a national benchmark. And Michael, who had always been known as the successful tech entrepreneur, also became known as an advocate for the rights of the elderly. One afternoon, almost a year after that fateful night, Michael and Helen were sitting in the mansion's garden, the same garden where everything had been revealed. But now the space felt different. The flowers were more vibrant, the lawn greener. Or maybe it was just that their perspective had changed. Helen held her son's hand, her eyes fixed on the horizon where the sun was beginning to set, painting the New York sky with shades of orange and pink. "You did a good thing, my son. You turned pain into hope." Michael gently squeezed her hand. "I learned from the best, Mom. You always turned hardship into opportunity. You always found light in the darkest situations. And you found your light too, after everything. I did. But I almost lost the most precious thing I had along the way." Helen looked at him with the wisdom that only years can bring. "But you didn't lose it, because when it really mattered, you opened your eyes. You stopped trusting only what you saw on the surface and started paying attention to what truly mattered. I should have done it sooner." "Maybe, but the past can't be changed, son. We can only choose what to do with what we've learned." They sat there for long minutes in comfortable silence, watching the city stretch out before them. A city of millions, each with their own battles, their own secrets, their own stories of pain and resilience. "Mom," Michael said finally, his voice low, "I wanted to tell you something I realized during that time I lived in disguise. You can tell me, son. I learned that true love isn't about grand gestures or dramatic declarations. It's about being present. It's about paying attention. It's about noticing when something is wrong, even when everyone says everything is fine. It's about not delegating what's important to anyone else, because some things only you can do." Helen smiled, squeezing his hand tighter. "And you learned all that on your own, living as a stranger in your own home?" "I learned it because I was finally able to see clearly. Without the distractions, without the illusions. I saw you, Mom. I saw your fear, your pain, your strength, and I saw how I almost let someone destroy all of that. But you didn't. When it mattered, you made the right choice." Michael turned to her, his eyes shining. "I promise you something, Mom. This time I saw everything. With my own eyes. With my own heart. And I will never again allow someone pretending to love to take our true love away from me. Never again." Helen raised her free hand and caressed her son's face. "I know, my dear. No. And you know what the best part is? Something beautiful was born from this whole experience. The Institute will help so many people. It will protect so many mothers, fathers, and grandparents. You transformed our pain into protection for others. It was the least I could do. It wasn't the least, it was the most. It was the most beautiful thing you could have done." The sun finally dipped below the horizon, and night began to fall over New York. But there in that garden, between a mother and her son, there was enough light to illuminate any darkness. Michael thought of Isabella briefly. He had heard through sources that she had left New York and moved to Miami. Her reputation in New York's social circles was destroyed, but she would probably try to start over somewhere else with a new social identity, perhaps with another target. But that was no longer his problem. He also thought of his father, Robert, who hadn't reappeared. A small part of Michael wondered if maybe, someday in the future, there might be room for some kind of reconciliation, but not now. Not yet. Some wounds took time to heal. But mostly, he thought about the future, about the institute that would continue to grow, helping more and more people, about the caregivers being trained with a new philosophy of respect and dignity, about the seniors being rescued from at-risk situations, about the families learning to value their elders. And he thought about how one decision, as bold and risky as it was, had changed everything. How becoming invisible had allowed him to finally see clearly. "Should we go inside, Mom? It's getting chilly." "Let's go, son, and will you have dinner with me tonight? No work, no phone calls, no distractions." Michael smiled. "Tonight and every night, Mom, I promise." And together, mother and son walked back into the house. No longer a mansion where fear lurked in the dark corners, but a home where love, finally recognized and protected, shone in every room. Because Michael Thompson had learned the most important lesson of all: you can have all the money in the world, all the success, all the power. But if you don't protect the people who truly love you, if you aren't present for them, if you let well-constructed masks deceive your eyes, then you have nothing that truly matters. And he would never make that mistake again. He would never again be a stranger in his own life. He would never again close his eyes to what was right in front of him, because he had seen, finally, truly seen, with his own eyes, with his own heart. And now that he had seen, he would never be able to unsee it again. Dear listeners, we hope the story of Michael and Helen has deeply touched your hearts. If you were moved by this journey of pain, revelation, and redemption, leave a like, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments what stood out to you most in this story. Have you or someone you know ever been through a similar situation? Share it with us. Every day we bring intense stories like this one, revealing the most complex sides of the human soul, the dilemmas of family relationships, and the strength of true love. We'll see you in the next episode with another narrative that will stir your emotions and make you reflect on what really matters in life.